peace and harmony, and then I'm going to talk about fear. So it's always interesting, when you bring in the music and then you try to match it with your message and figure out, so how's Reverend Michael going to weave all of this one in? And because there are some new people here today, I just want to kind of, maybe through introduction, talk about a little bit how we get to where we get. We have a magazine that we publish that's called the Science of Mind magazine, and out of that there are daily guides, and on the guide for the Sunday is where I draw my message. And so the message for today is from fear to faith, and that's where I'm going to enter in. How do we practice our faith? How do we get out of that place of fear and move into that place of faith, which gives us the confidence to move through the challenges that may show up in our life. In our teaching, we believe that there is a divine intelligence, there is an infinite and eternal life. And this is our teaching symbol. We call this the Science of Mind. It was drawn, used by our founder Ernest Holmes when he was bringing this forth. And the idea of the Science of Mind, and of course this one is a little bit more elaborate than he used. He just used stick figures. But through the artistic individual who created this, the circle is a representation of all of life, and that out of that place of the mind of God moves down into the point in which we are experiencing and expressing ourselves, and that we all return back into that eternal life and infinite intelligence. And the representation of the V is that it stays open, so that we're not shut down, as you were saying in your message this morning, Eloise, about this idea of releasing the past ways and opening up into the new ways. And I would also explain a little bit about this position that we call a licensed practitioner. That in our teaching, we believe that we're all practitioners. We're all studying this thing called life. That we didn't come with an operation manual that said, you're going to go through this experience, and then you'll have that, and then here's the answer for this, and then you'll resolve that, and then it'll all be fine and perfect kind of a way. It's an experiment. That we're all in this life as an experiment, each of us having our own expression and our own experience as we move through each and every stage that we're going through. So as we're studying this, we have the opportunity, and we offer classes here that allow us to understand a little bit more about this idea of what we mean when we talk about the power of our mind, that it is through our thoughts that we are influencing and creating the experience around us. And so as we go through this study, there's an opportunity for us to go deeper within our own individual self. And these are what our practitioners are doing. There's 2 years of study that you just for the general moving along, and then after you've completed that, you can enter into a very intensive study, which is another 2 years of classwork and coursework, and going deep within to understand your own self and your own individual life. And this is what the practitioners do. And once they've completed now 4 years of study, then they're eligible to sit before a panel of their peers and ministers that get to rate them on how well they're doing and give them that recognition that we call licensed practitioner or spiritual counselor. So that's the coursework that individuals, Eloise and Caitlin, and who else here is a practitioner? Sandra is a practitioner, and of course Reverend Ann and myself have gone through the study in order just to get into the ministerial school. So acknowledgement for all of the work that you've done on your individual self and your consciousness. It is that place that through consciousness that we grow and develop and understanding more about this thing called life. And I think that there's always, and I say this all the time, that there's always some challenge that we're going through. There's always something that seems to be facing us that wants us to grow, because I believe that's what the experience of life is about. It's about the growing into something more magnificent. It is in our teaching and in our belief that each of us is a divine expression. We are here for that purpose, and that if we realize that, recognize that, and we choose to move through our experience and to move into a greater place of expression, then we will have to go through and conquer all of those fears that show up for us. And even after all of the study that we've done, we continue to show up, and there continues to be challenges, and there continues to be opportunities for us to move into a greater experience. And when you boil those down into what are those challenges, they usually show up in a place of fear. Fear being that expression of what some might call a lack of faith. Or that when we develop our faith, that when we have a confidence that there is something back behind all of this, that there is a divine presence that is the first cause, there is an infinite intelligence, there is a universal love that is demonstrating, manifesting all of this universe, and its purpose is to express love, and it wants good and only good for us, that we get there in a better way by practicing living our faith and our principles and our values and moving beyond anything that can look like fear. In the daily guide of which I was drawing the message from, it uses the example that we need to, in ways in which we can move out of our fear. So it says, for example, if you have a fear of death, you may want to go sit in a cemetery all night long. I'm thinking, I'm not sure that I understand what that would do, other than scare you maybe. My experience of cemeteries is really quite different. When I was in high school, the summer after I graduated, that was my first job, was to work in a cemetery and be a caretaker there, basically mowing the grass, but also digging the graves and so I found it, quite a lovely place. It was very quiet, very peaceful. Nobody was talking back at you or judging you. And I was getting paid to be there, so it turned out to be quite a good experience. But this idea of moving from fear into faith is the practice that each of us do, and we do it across denominations. We do it in all faith traditions. We do it in all ways in which we're trying to develop ourselves and grow into a greater experience of life. The whole story of the birth of Christ is really about this idea of moving out of a place of fear and into a place of faith. the whole experience that was going in that story of traveling, and to have to go and register someplace and being in a place of which they were not necessarily welcomed. The whole idea of having to be in a stable in order to have the birth and be welcomed into the world, because there didn't seem to be room for strangers to come into the city. So it's a story, it's an example, it's an understanding of that if we have faith, if we truly believe that we are here for a divine purpose, that we will move through all of our challenges. There's, in a lot of our classwork, there's a exercise that we do that's called the Fear to Faith Workshop, and it allows for us to develop out of, to kind of identify maybe what those fears are. And I'm not going to do the workshop this morning, but I'm going to give you a little example of it, because I think that it's useful as we come to a completion of this year, not only this calendar year, but for us in this community, we come to a completion of 45 years of celebrating being here in this community, but it's also a completion of another decade. And we're going to be moving into a new year. And we've already established our theme for the new year. And as I'm speaking about that, I'm going to do a little promo. We've got our spiritual journal that's for sale over here near the sound booth that has our monthly and our weekly topics already listed, and you can journal along as we go through the year. So our theme for 2020 is spiritual vision. 2020, perfect vision. Okay. I knew you'd all get there. But as we can complete this year, so it's an opportunity to think about, so what was this year like? What went on for you in this year? What were some of the challenges? What were some of the successes? How did this year look for you? And if you can spend a little bit of time thinking about what the year was, what your experience was, and maybe it wasn't as great as you had wanted it to be. Maybe it was just so-so. Maybe it was a really good year. But perhaps you would like this next year to be even greater. So that's where we're thinking about, as a community, we want to take our 45 years that we've been here, and then we want to see what's next. So we begin by identifying where we're at. That's the reflection. Spend some time in your personal life. Spend some time thinking about the community. Kind of identify, get a hold of what you have perceived this last year has been. And that's a way in which we can also move. If you've been in a place of fear, if you've been in a place of lack or limitation or uncertainty, if you've been in that situation where maybe it hasn't been perfect health or perfect relationship, you can move beyond that by first identifying what it is. So sometimes that means you have to get out of denial. You have to stand in a place, in order to recognize your truth, you have to stand in that place of identifying where you are, what this has been. So you reflect on that, get a little bit of an idea on that, and then you begin to imagine what it is that you would like to be. So you come from that place of, if it's, for me, this past year has been a lot about my health. And, where is my health? What has been going on with that? And so now I've identified that, I've recognized that. One of the things that I was dealing with was a little bit about some of that weight, and now I'm back into my vest and I can button it again, So I've identified that, I've recognized that, and now I want to move into a greater experience of that, maintaining that health, maintaining that stability, maintaining the nurture and the nutritional value that I want to bring into that. So I recognize that that's where I want to be, and that's what works best for me. And then as I look at some of that idea of what has been maybe my fear or my resistance to what has been good. So the resistance was not taking care of my health. Just being out there and eating all of the Big Macs that I wanted to, and all of the French fries that I was desiring, and realizing that wasn't in my best health. So my resistance to taking care of my body, my physical being, by not looking at what was of nutritional value for me, and then praising that aspect of what I desire. So the health and the well-being of what I want and what I'm looking for. In this Fear to Faith workshop that we do, we also do a prayer, an affirmative prayer that goes with that. And so, thinking about my own experience, I'm thinking about I release my belief in lack, or I release my belief in poor health, and I release my need to just eat junk food, and then I praise the well-being that I am. So if you're going through that, and if you can remember a few of these points, that idea of that you release the belief in lack and limitation. I release the belief that I don't have the wisdom and the truth. I release the need or the resistance or the idea that I can't have good food and still be healthy. And then to praise the abundance that I am, to praise the truth that I am, to praise the well-being that I am, to praise all that good that comes into me. So these are the ways in which we move out of this place of fear. First of all, you have to recognize that there's something going on. You have to recognize the challenge. You have to recognize that maybe you're in denial. Oftentimes people are afraid to even identify that there's a problem there. Have you ever had that experience? People say, "How are you?" And you say, "Oh, I'm fine." But you're not. That idea that I say in the beginning, we are all whole, perfect, and complete, and yet there's still more to be done. You can be in a great place, but you know that you can always do better. So recognize, be willing to identify that there may be a problem. And as you identify it, then you can come forth and identify why you're going there, because perhaps you have some belief. My work in doing my spiritual consciousness, and this has been going up for me ever since childhood, is that I never felt like I was enough. That was my big block in consciousness. I never felt like I was enough. Maybe that was because I was the fourth out of 5 children, and I could never quite, measure up to what my brothers were doing. I was never as big as they were. I was never as intelligent as they were. I was never as athletic as they were. I proved them all wrong, but that idea that I was never enough. The one thing that it gave me was that motivation to always try harder, but then sometimes it became overcompensating. So then there it showed up again. I was never enough. I was always trying to do more. And at some point, I have to release that. I have to surrender into. And that's when we get into faith. When we get into that place is that I'm already enough. If each and every one of us is already a child of God, then we are already worthy and deserving, and there's nothing more that we need to do other than to show up and to be our perfect self. Just be who you are. Don't try to be somebody else. Be who you are and be the best you, and then you will be enough. But if you're always trying to be your older brother or your older sister or somebody that you idolize, if you're trying to be them, they already are. You can't be them. Be you. Be the best you that you can be. And that's how we move out of that fear and faith. It happens in communities. You know, in our little center here, if we're trying to be in our movement, our largest center is in Denver, and they have something like 10,000 members. You know, if we're trying to be them, if we're trying to match them, we'll never be that because they already are them. We need to be who we are right here in our Center for Spiritual Living, Menifee Valley. Be the best that we can be in our beloved community for each and every one of us loving ourselves. And so one of the things that I wanted to complete with today, because I think it's important as we complete this year, as we complete this decade, and I know that this year has been filled with a lot of challenges, I want us to move into a place of peace. In your bulletins today, I've included a prayer for world peace. And I'm inviting you to take that with you. And at least for the rest of this year, and as we enter into the new year, each morning I would like you to read this. And I'm going to read it now, and I want you to just kind of listen deeply from a place of love. I know there is but one mind, which is the mind of God, in which all people live and move and have their being. I know there is a divine pattern for humanity. And within this pattern, there is infinite harmony and peace, cooperation, unity, and mutual helpfulness. I know that the mind of humankind, being one with the mind of God, shall discover the method, the way, and the means best fitted to permit the flow of divine love between individuals and nations. Thus, harmony, peace, cooperation, unity, and mutual helpfulness are experienced by all. I know there will be a free interchange of ideas, of cultures, of spiritual concepts, of ethics, of educational systems, and scientific discoveries. For all good belongs to all alike. I know that because divine mind has created us all, that we are bound together in one infinite and perfect unity. I know that all people and all nations will remain individual but united for the common purpose of promoting peace, happiness, harmony, and prosperity. I know that deep within each person, the divine pattern of perfect peace is already implanted. I now declare that in each person and in leaders of thought everywhere, this divine pattern moves into action and form to the end that all nations and all people will live together in peace, harmony, and prosperity forever. And so it is. So I invite you to consider that we're completing this year, this decade, this 45 years, this journey in your life up until this moment has already been And we are opening up into the newness. We're opening up into this understanding that we have the faith and we have the confidence in the faith that there is a divine mind, an infinite intelligence, and an eternal life, and that all of us are living in this world in peace and harmony and joy and love. And I acknowledge and accept that that's true for each and every one of us. Thank you for being here today. Namaste.